Welcome back to the deep dive. We are doing something a little different today.
A little bit, yeah.
Usually when we crack open these source materials and, start talking about the deep past, the mind just naturally defaults to the greatest hits.
Oh, absolutely. The T-Rex, the Triceratops.
Exactly. The heavy hitters of the Cretaceous period.
Yeah.
It's the Hollywood version of prehistory.
It is the poster child version, for sure. It's the lunchbox version.
That's it, the lunchbox version. But today, we're pushing the clock back, way, way back. We've been reading through the Super Dinosaur Encyclopedia from DK and the Smithsonian, and we made a conscious decision to just skip the celebrity dinosaurs for a moment.
For now, at least.
For now. We are looking at the source code. We are looking at the monsters that came before the dinosaurs took over and the very chaotic sort of experimental days of the early dinosaurs themselves.
Which is, in my opinion, a much more interesting story. Because when you look at the Paleozoic era, you're looking at evolution essentially just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks.
That is the perfect image. And to orient us, because the timescales here are, frankly, they're impossible to hold in your head without help, I want to start with a visualization from the source material that really kind of break my brain a little bit.
Okay.
It's the geological clock.
I love this analogy. It is the ultimate humility check.
It really is. So for you listening, I want you to visualize this. Imagine the entire history of Earth, all 4.5 billion years of it, compressed into a standard 12-hour clock face.
Okay, got it.
The Earth forms at midnight. Life starts appearing pretty early, simple single-cell goop in the water. But here is the kicker. When do humans show up on this clock?
It's almost a trick question. We don't show up until the very, very last second.
Literally the last.
Literally. If you look at the diagram in the book, modern humans, Homo sapiens, we appear at roughly 1 second to noon.
1 second. That is it. Our entire history.
Everything. The pyramids, the Roman Empire, the internet, all of it crammed into the final tick of the clock. Everything else. The billions of years of evolution, the rise and fall of oceans, the movement of continents, the dominance of the dinosaurs, it all happened before we even walked onto the stage.
The dinosaurs themselves only appear at about, 11 p.m.?
Around 11 p.m., yeah, and they vanish around 11:40 p.m. They get a whole 40 minutes of fame.
And that is our playground today. We are diving into that massive stretch of time between, let's say, life gets complicated and the T-Rex eats everything. We're going to meet giant underwater shells that hunt sharks, scorpions the size of dogs, and millipedes that are longer than a station wagon.
And perhaps most importantly, we're going to deconstruct the very definition of a dinosaur. Because as I was reviewing these sections, I realized that a lot of the animals I had in my toy box as a kid were, well, they were absolute imposters.
I felt a little betrayed by the Dimetrodon section, I won't lie.
Oh, everyone does. It's a rite of passage.
But we will get there. First, we need to do some detective work. Section 1 of our dive is about the science itself. Because, how do we actually know any of this?
Right. Paleontology.
I think there's a stereotype here. You hear paleontology and you picture a guy in a wide-brimmed hat brushing dust off a bone in the desert.
Which, to be fair, is the romantic part of the job. That does happen. But the source makes a really critical distinction right up front. Paleontology isn't just digging holes or, treasure hunting.
It's more complex.
It's a synthesis science. You can't just be a bone collector.
What does that synthesis look like in practice then?
It's basically a three-legged stool. You have to be a geologist to understand the rock layers and the age of the sediment.
Your context.
A context of the find, exactly. You have to be a biologist to understand anatomy and how a living thing actually functions physically. Like, how do muscles attach to this specific bone?
Okay, that makes sense.
And you need to be a chemist to understand how organic matter turns into stone. It's geology, biology, and chemistry all wrapped into one discipline.
And what struck me in reading through the intro is just how incredibly lucky we are to have any evidence at all. The book calls it the incomplete puzzle.
Incomplete is putting it so mildly. The source emphasizes that fossilization is an aberration. It's an error in the natural order.
Because nature's designed to recycle, right? Nothing's meant to last.
Precisely. When an animal dies, the ecosystem is designed to break it down immediately. Scavengers strip the meat, bacteria break down the soft tissue, wind and rain scatter the calcium in the bones. 99.9% of everything that has ever lived just vanished.
Dust to dust.
Literally.
So if I want to be immortalized as a fossil, what is the recipe? What needs to happen to me?
You need to have a very, very bad day, followed by a very, very lucky break.
Okay.
First, you need rapid burial. You can't just die on a grassy plain and expect to be fossilized. You need to be covered by sediment mud, volcanic ash, silt from a river flood almost immediately after death.
To stop the scavengers from getting to you.
And to stop the oxygen, you need an anaerobic environment, one without oxygen, to halt decomposition. Then, over millions and millions of years, you need groundwater that's rich in minerals to seep through that sediment.
This is the part I didn't fully grasp before, the chemistry of it. It's not just the bones sitting there.
No, not at all. It's a process called permineralization. The water carries silica or calcite, these tiny minerals, into the microscopic pores of your bones. As the water evaporates, the minerals stay behind, crystallizing.
That's filling in the gaps.
It's filling in the gaps, and then eventually the organic bone itself is completely replaced by rock. You literally turn to stone from the inside out.
So when we see a bone in a museum, it's not bone anymore. It's a rock in the shape of a bone.
Precisely. And because this requires such a specific, frankly, bizarre set of circumstances, you have to die in a flood or get stuck in a mudslide or fall into a tar pit, we have massive, massive gaps in the record.
Right.
We might have a great picture of life in a swamp from a just 10 miles away.
Because things just don't fossilize on mountainsides.
They just erode away.
So how do scientists fill those gaps? I mean, if you only find a jawbone, how do you even begin to know what the rest of the creature looked like?
It's a mix of comparative anatomy and modern technology. If you find a prehistoric creature that has a beak like a squid, you look at a modern squid. You use the known to approximate the unknown.
But that involves a lot of guesswork, doesn't it? Educated guesswork, but still.
It does, and that's where the oops factor comes in. The source includes a fantastic anecdote about the iguanodon that really highlights how this science evolves.
I love this story. This is from the Victorian era, right? Super early days of paleontology.
Mid-19th century, yes. Some of the very first paleontologists found this massive skeleton of a plant eater, the iguanodon. And alongside the bones, they found this conical, spiky object.
With like a horn.
Exactly. They didn't have much to go on, so they looked at modern iguanas, they looked at rhinos, and they said, aha, this giant lizard had a horn on its nose. And for decades, that is how iguanodon was drawn, painted, and displayed in museums.
With a rhino horn.
With a little nub on its snout, yep. Until they found a more complete skeleton.
And where did the horn actually go?
It was a thumb.
A thumb spike. That's so much cooler.
Isn't it a rigid, conical thumb spike, likely used for, I don't know, breaking into tough seeds or maybe shanking a predator in self-defense?
Wow.
But it just shows you paleontology is a self-correcting science. You find a puzzle piece, you think it's a piece of the sky, and 10 years later you find another piece and realize, oh, that was actually a piece of the ocean. The picture's constantly changing.
Speaking of puzzle pieces, let's talk about the evidence itself. Section 2 of our deep dive. The source makes a big deal about differentiating body fossils from trace fossils.
This is so crucial. Body fossils are the glamour shots. They're the skulls, the femurs, the big impressive bones. But trace fossils, they tell the story. They are the behavior. They are the action shots.
So this is things like footprints, burrows, nests.
Exactly. Think about what a set of footprints can tell you that a skeleton can't. A skeleton tells you the animal could walk. A footprint tells you how it walked.
Running.
Was it running? Did it limp? Did it move in a herd with others? You can see trackways where a predator was stalking a prey animal. It's a frozen moment.
It captures a specific moment in time, a story.
It's a story in the stone. And then you have the unsung hero of paleontology, which the source delights in pointing out, coprolites.
Which is the very scientific way of saying fossilized poop.
It sounds funny, and we always chuckle about it, but coprolites are data gold mines. A bone tells you what the animal was. A coprolite tells you how the animal lived.
How so?
You can slice open a coprolite, put it under a microscope, and find crushed bone fragments, scales, undigested plant pollen, even traces of ancient parasites that lived in its gut.
So you can see its last meal.
You can see its last meal. You can see what the environment was like based on the pollen. You can understand its entire digestive system. It's a snapshot of the gut microbiome from 100 million years ago.
That is amazing. A little disgusting, but amazing.
It's intimate data that you just can't get from a clean fossilized tooth.
And then there is the holy grail of fossils, which the source mentions. Amber.
Ah, yes. Amber is fossilized tree resin, not sap, but the thick, sticky resin that hardens over millions of years. If an unlucky insect or a small lizard gets stuck in it, it is sealed in an airtight, watertight tomb.
Like the mosquito in Jurassic Park.
Exactly the right concept, though the whole extracting DNA thing is still firmly in the realm of sci-fi. DNA just degrades way too fast over that kind of time.
Okay, so no real-life Jurassic Park.
Not yet. But what you do get is breathtaking soft tissue preservation. You can see the individual hairs on a fly's leg. You can see the delicate texture of the wings. It's a 3D time capsule in a way that flattened rock fossils just aren't.
Before we leave the evidence section, I want to touch on one more thing the book mentioned about museums. It kind of shattered an illusion for me. The giant skeletons we see standing up in the museum halls, they aren't always real.
Very often they aren't. And that's for a good reason. Real fossils are incredibly heavy. Remember, they're solid rock now, and they are often very fragile and brittle.
Okay.
If you tried to mount a real fossilized T-Rex skull on a metal frame 20 feet in the air, the steel supports might bend, or worse, the skull could just shatter under its own immense weight.
So they use stunt doubles.
They use casts. Highly accurate, lightweight replicas made of fiberglass or resin. It allows them to pose the animal dynamically running, jumping, fighting, without risking the priceless, one-of-a-kind original specimen.
Where's the real one?
The real one is usually tucked away safely in a climate-controlled drawer in the museum's collection, available for researchers to study up close.
So when I'm staring up at a T-Rex, I'm probably looking at a very, very good stunt double.
Usually. But an accurate one, it's a perfect copy.
Okay, I could live with that. So we know how we find them, and we know what we are looking for. Now let's fire up the time machine. We are going back to the Paleozoic era.
Ancient life. That is what Paleozoic means.
This is the longest era we are discussing, and honestly, looking at the images in the source, this feels like an alien planet. This does not look like Earth as we know it.
It really doesn't. And it ends with the biggest bang in history, the Permian extinction, which wiped out something like 96% of all marine species. It was a near total reset.
But before that end, life got very, very big and very weird.
Oh, yeah.
Let's start underwater. The source highlights a creature called Camarasaurus.
The chambered horn.
This thing is pure nightmare fuel for me. Describe this for anyone listening who hasn't seen the picture.
Okay, so picture a squid. Now take that squid and jam it backwards into a massive, straight, cone-shaped shell, like an ice cream cone of death.
And when we say massive,
we are talking up to 20 feet or 6 meters in length.
That is the length of a pickup truck. A swimming, carnivorous pickup truck with tentacles.
Living about 470 million years ago, in the Ordovician period, this was the undisputed apex predator of its time. Nothing messed with Camarasaurus.
The text mentions it had a beak-like mouth.
Yes, nestled right in the center of all those tentacles. And that beak was powerful, capable of puncturing bone, or in the context of the time, puncturing the thick shells of other creatures.
Because everything back then was armored, right? It was an arms race.
It was a total arms race. There were these jawless fish with heavy armored plating, other shelled creatures called trilobites. Camarasaurus needed that beak to crack them open like walnuts.
The source mentions it was likely an ambush hunter. How does a 20-foot shell ambush anything? It doesn't sound very nimble.
It definitely wasn't built for speed. It used that rigid shell for buoyancy control. It had chambers inside filled with gas air that it could adjust to float at different depths. So it likely just drifted or hovered silently in the murky water, waiting for something to swim by, and then snap, the tentacles would shoot out and grab it.
It also mentions it might have eaten its own kind.
Cannibalism is not uncommon in the animal kingdom, especially when you're the biggest thing around. If you're hungry, and there's a smaller Camarasaurus nearby, well, lunch is served.
Okay, so we're staying out of the deep ocean. Let's move to the shallows, or maybe the land. The jury is still out. It says we have the Brontoscorpia.
The thunder scorpion.
Great name.
A fantastic name, and the stats absolutely justify it. We're talking 35.5 inches long. That's nearly a meter.
I'm trying to visualize a yardstick-long scorpion. That's unsettling.
Think about a scorpion the size of a medium-sized dog, like a beagle, but with more legs and a giant venomous stinger on its tail.
The source says it's 5 times the size of the largest modern scorpion.
By a long shot. And there's a big debate, which the source highlights, about where it actually lived.
Yeah, was it a swimmer or a walker? What's the evidence?
Well, it had gills, which strongly implies it was aquatic, But its anatomy, its legs, suggests it could walk, so some scientists think it was semi-aquatic.
Like a seal or something.
Kind of, yeah. Maybe it ventured onto land like a mud skipper, perhaps to hunt for small critters on the shore or just to escape even larger predators in the water.
Imagine walking on a prehistoric beach and seeing a scorpion the size of a golden retriever crawling out of the surf.
I would rather not imagine that, but yes, that is the world of the Brontoscorpio.
And it had the weaponry to back up the size, that large stinger.
And the pedipalps, the big claws at the front, it used those to grab and hold its food. The text notes that while it likely had venom, we don't know what that ancient venom was like. But honestly, at that size, the mechanical damage alone from the stinger would be significant.
Okay, so the ocean is scary, the beach is scary. Let's go into the forest. Surely the forest is safe.
The forest is absolutely not safe.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
Welcome to the Carboniferous period, home of the Arthropleura.
This is the one that gets me. It's a millipede. But it's not the cute little thing that curls up into a ball in your garden.
No, this is a colossal crawler.
Give us the stats.
Up to 6.5 feet long, 2 meters, and about 20 inches wide.
A millipede longer than a tall man.
I
Why?
believe.
Why did bugs and arthropods get this big?
It all comes down to the atmosphere. During the Carboniferous period, the oxygen levels on Earth were much, much higher than they are today. We're talking maybe 35% oxygen compared to our 21%.
Okay.
Arthropods, insects, millipedes, scorpions, they breathe through a system of tubes in their bodies called trachea. In our current atmosphere, they are limited in size because they just can't get enough oxygen to a massive body. But back then, the air was supercharged. It was like they were on steroids.
So they could just keep growing and growing.
Exactly. And Arthropleura grew to be the largest land arthropod of all time.
The visual description in the source is intense. 30 jointed segments with armored plates.
And it's scuttled.
I don't say scuttled.
It's scuttled through the giant, swampy tropical forests of the period. But here's a small comfort. Despite being a monster, it was actually a plant eater.
Really?
Yeah, it ate rotting plant matter on the forest floor.
Okay, so it won't eat me. It'll just run me over like a freight train.
Basically. The source notes, it had relatively thin armor. It didn't need heavy plating because, frankly, what was going to attack it, it was the tank of the forest floor.
And how do we know how big it was? The source mentions trace evidence again. This is where that comes in.
Tracks. We found fossilized tracks left by these creatures that are almost 20 inches wide. You measure the track, you do the math on the leg span and the body width, and you realize you are dealing with an absolute titan.
Okay, so that's the Paleozoic. Giant shells, dog-sized scorpions, car-sized millipedes. A true monster movie.
Huh.
But then, the world changing, and we move into the Permian. This is section 4, the ancestors and the imposters.
This is where things get really confusing for the casual dinosaur fan.
Because we are about to talk about Dimetrodon. And I feel like I need to apologize to Dimetrodon because I've definitely called it a dinosaur my whole life.
You and everyone else. It is in every single bag of plastic dinosaurs you buy at the toy store. It's right there next to the T-Rex and the Stegosaurus.
But the source is very clear. Not a dinosaur.
Not a dinosaur. In fact, it is more closely related to you than it is to a dinosaur.
Okay, explain that. How is a giant lizard with a giant sail on its back related to me?
Well, first off, it's not a lizard, it's a synapsid. This is a huge group of animals that includes all mammals and all of our ancient ancestors.
So what's the giveaway? What makes it a synapsid?
It's all in the skull, but the easiest thing to point to is the teeth. The name Dimetrodon actually relates to its teeth. It means 2 measures of teeth.
Okay.
It had different shaped teeth in its mouth, sharp incisors at the front for nipping, big canine-like teeth for stabbing, and shearing teeth in the back for slicing meat.
Like we do. We have incisors, canines, molars.
Exactly. This is called heterodont dentition. Reptiles generally have homodont teeth. They're all the same shape, just different sizes. If you look at a crocodile, every tooth is basically a cone-shaped peg. But Dimetrodon had specialized teeth for different jobs. That is a fundamentally mammalian trait.
That is mind-blowing. So it's a proto-mammal cousin.
In a very, very distant sense, yes. And to put it in perspective, it lived 60 million years before the first dinosaur ever evolved.
That's an incredible amount of time.
It's a bigger time gap than between the last T-Rex and us.
Wow. Okay, let's talk about the sail. That giant, iconic fan on its back. The source mentions a heated debate.
Pun intended. Maybe a little.
So the old theory, the one I definitely learned in school, was thermoregulation. The idea was that Dimetrodon was cold-blooded. In the morning, it would turn its sail to the sun, let the blood flowing through it warm up quickly, and basically get a head start on the day while everyone else was still sluggish and cold.
Like a living solar panel.
It does make a certain amount of sense.
Yeah.
But modern science is pushing back on that idea. The current theory, the one gaining more traction, leans more toward display.
Just showing off.
Exactly, a giant billboard on its back for attracting mates or intimidating rivals. The source mentions some really cool evidence for this. They found spines from the sail with injuries that had healed over time.
This suggests the bone itself might have been exposed or covered in something other than just a simple web of skin full of blood vessels. If it was purely for blood flow, damage like that would be catastrophic. It would bleed out. But if it's for display, well, maybe scars were a sign of a tough individual.
And the posture is changing too, right? I always picture it dragging its belly on the ground.
That's the classic sprawling look. But recent track studies, again with the trace fossils, suggest it walked much more upright. Not fully standing like a dog or a cow, but not dragging its stomach like a lizard. It was an active, high-walking predator.
Man, everything I knew about Dimetrodon was wrong.
Join the club.
Okay, so that's the mammal imposter. Then we have Simuria. The source calls this one a shapeshifter.
Simuria is a complete biological paradox. If you found the skeleton of an adult, you'd look at it and say, okay, that's a reptile. It's got strong limbs, adaptations for living on land, but it's an amphibian relative.
How on earth do we know that?
The life cycle. We found fossil evidence that the larval stage was fully aquatic. It started life as something like a tadpole with gills.
So it starts like a frog tadpole and then grows up to look like a little land reptile.
Yes. It represents that blurry, fascinating evolutionary line between amphibians, who are tied to the water to reproduce, and reptiles, who finally broke free onto land with the invention of the shelled egg. Simuria was right on that cusp, and it was about 24 inches long, twice the size of the biggest modern frog.
A frog, tadpole, lizard thing.
Evolution was experimenting as a weird time.
And then, speaking of amphibians, we have the swamp king, Prionosuchus.
Well, this is a monster.
The visual here is basically a crocodile, but something's off. It's too long, too slender.
It looks like a crocodile because it filled the exact same ecological niche. This is a classic example of convergent evolution. Nature finds a design that works. Long snout, sharp teeth, low profile in the water for ambushing prey, and it uses that blueprint again and again across different animal groups.
But it wasn't a crocodile.
No, it was an amphibian, a massive temnospondyle, which is an ancient group of amphibians. Think of it as a salamander that evolved to act like a croc.
How massive are we talking?
33 feet, 10 meters long.
Wait, a 33-foot salamander?
Yes. For a comparison, the book says it's 8 times longer than the Chinese giant salamander, which is the biggest one alive today.
Imagine a salamander the size of a school bus.
It had a long, narrow snout filled with needle-sharp teeth, perfect for snapping up fish. It spent its life in murky swamps, acting exactly like a modern gharial or a crocodile does today. But underneath it all, it was still an amphibian with that permeable skin.
So the Permian was full of these almost creatures, almost mammals, almost reptiles, amphibians pretending to be reptiles, but then catastrophe.
The Great Dying, the end Permian mass extinction, the end of the Paleozoic.
And out of the ashes of that global extinction event, we get the Mesozoic era, the age of dinosaurs. This brings us to section 5. What actually is a dinosaur?
This is the most important definition in the entire deep dive, because as we've just seen, just being big and scaly and prehistoric doesn't make you a dinosaur.
The source breaks it down anatomically. And it really all comes down to the hips and the legs.
It's all about the stance. This is the crucial defining difference.
Break it down for us.
Okay, picture a modern lizard, or a crocodile, or even our old friend Dimetrodon. Their legs stick out to the side of their body. Their elbows and knees point outwards. This is a sprawling stance. It requires a lot of energy just to hold the body up off the ground.
Okay, I can picture that. And a dinosaur.
A dinosaur has its legs tucked directly underneath its body. The legs are like pillars holding up the torso. Think of a horse or a dog or us.
So an upright stance.
An upright or erect stance. This is a much more efficient way to move. They can carry more weight, they can move faster for longer, and they can grow much, much larger because their bones are supporting the weight directly against gravity.
And the source mentions a very specific anatomical detail, a hole in the hip.
Yes, the perforate acetabulum. It sounds technical, but it's simple. The acetabulum is the hip socket where the thigh bone fits. In dinosaurs, there's a hole right through the middle of that socket. This unique structure is what allows for that fully upright, pillar-like stance. If you have that hole, you're in the club. If you don't, you're just some other kind of prehistoric reptile.
The source also touches on their growth rates. This is surprising to me.
This is some of the coolest modern paleontological work. By slicing open fossilized dinosaur bones and looking at the growth rings, kind of like tree rings, scientists can tell how fast they grew.
And what did they find?
They grew incredibly rapidly, much, much faster than modern reptiles. A crocodile grows slowly and steadily its whole life. A dinosaur like a T-Rex shot up like a rocket in its teenage years, packing on pounds every day.
Which suggests they weren't just cold-blooded, sluggish lizards basking in the sun all day.
Exactly. It implies a high metabolism, very active animals, and it's one of the strongest pieces of evidence that many dinosaurs were, in fact, warm-blooded.
Now, we have to talk about classification because the source throws a twist in here that always confuses me. Lizard-hipped versus bird-hipped.
Ah, the two great clans of dinosaurs. The Saurischians, which means lizard-hipped, and the Ornithischians, which means bird-hipped.
So surely birds must have evolved from the bird-hipped group, right? It's in the name.
You would think so. It would make perfect logical sense. But nature loves a good joke.
Go on.
Birds actually evolved from the Saurischians, the lizard-hipped group.
Why? That makes no sense.
Well, the hip structure of the Ornithischians, the shape of their pelvis, superficially looks like a modern bird's hip, which is how they got the name back in the 1800s. But the actual lineage that led to birds came from the theropods, the meat-eaters like T-Rex, which are firmly in the lizard-hipped camp. They just eventually, independently, evolved a hip structure that also looked like a bird's. Another case of convergent evolution.
So the names are essentially misleading.
They're historically accurate to when they were named, but they are evolutionarily confusing.
Yes, and the science is still changing. The source also mentions the Ornithocelida hypothesis.
Right, this is very recent, cutting-edge science. For over a century, the family tree has been set in stone. But some paleontologists are now proposing we rearrange the whole thing, grouping the meat-eating theropods and the bird-hipped Ornithischians together into a new group called Ornithocelida.
And leave the longnecks on their own brand.
Exactly. It's hugely controversial, and the source makes sure to note it, which is great because it shows that even the fundamental definition of how dinosaurs are related to each other is still being fought over today. This science is not dead.
So we have the definition. Upright stance, hole in the hip, fast growth. Now let's meet the first true dinosaurs, section 6.
We're in the late Triassic period now, around 225 million years ago.
And the source sets the scene really well. Dinosaurs are not the bosses yet, not by a long shot.
No, they are the underdogs. They are generally small, mostly bipedal, and they are living in the shadow of other much larger archosaurs, especially the giant crocodile relatives called Rauisuchians.
But then we get a creature like Herrerasaurus.
One of the earliest dinosaurs we have good fossil material for. And compared to its dinosaur peers at the time, it was an absolute heavyweight.
The stats from the book, 20 feet long, 573 pounds.
Which is tiny compared to a later T-Rex, but you have to remember, the other early dinosaurs averaged around 77 pounds. Herrerasaurus was a monster for its time.
And it has this mosaic of features, a mix of primitive and advanced traits. The source mentions a flexible lower jaw.
This is fascinating. It had a joint in the middle of its lower jaw that allowed it to flex and bow outwards. Think of how a snake can unhinge its jaw to swallow a big egg. This allowed Herrerasaurus to get a better grip on struggling prey, acting like a shock absorber so the jaw wouldn't snap.
A serrated vice grip.
Exactly. It also had these sharp, grasping claws on its hands. This wasn't a clumsy animal. It was a nimble, dangerous, and very successful hunter.
But there is a debate about what it actually is, right?
Right.
Where it fits in the family tree.
Always. Because it's so early in the timeline, it shares features with both the meat-eaters, the theropods, and the long-necked plant-eaters, the sauropodomorphs. It sits at that murky, confusing root of the dinosaur family tree.
So we don't know if it's an early T-Rex relative or an early Brontosaurus relative?
Some scientists say it's a very early theropod. Some say it's a basal Saurischian from before that major split even happened. Some even argue it might not be a true dinosaur at all, but a very close relative. The jury is still out.
It's like looking at a Model T Ford. You can see the bits that will eventually become a Ferrari and the bits that will become a Ford F-150, all mixed together in one primitive package.
That is a perfect analogy. It is the prototype dinosaur.
So Herrerasaurus is running around eating smaller creatures, probably trying to avoid the giant non-dinosaur crocodile cousins. And eventually the Triassic ends, another mass extinction happens, many of the competitors get wiped out, and the dinosaurs finally take the crown.
They inherit the Earth, and they keep it for over 150 million years.
Which brings us to our outro. We've gone from the geological clock, where humans are a mere blip, through the truly alien oceans of the Paleozoic, past the mammal imposter Dimetrodon, and arrived at the dawn of the dinosaurs.
It's a journey through deep, deep time. And what really stands out to me from this whole section is the turnover.
What do you mean by that?
We tend to think of the Earth as ours. It's the age of mammals, the age of humans, or we think of the age of dinosaurs as the only other time that really mattered. But what this deep dive shows is that for millions and millions of years, the world belonged to giant shelled squid.
Right.
Then it belonged to giant amphibians that looked like crocodiles. Then it belonged to the synapsids, our own distant relatives.
The dominant life form is constantly changing. It's not a permanent title.
Exactly. Dinosaurs were the underdogs for millions of years before they finally took over. And mammals, our direct ancestors, were tiny little things scurrying under the feet of dinosaurs for 150 million years before we got our shot at the title.
It's a really humbling perspective. The source mentions that 99% of all life forms that have ever existed are now extinct.
We are the survivors. We are the 1%. For now.
So here is a provocative thought to end on, something to chew on. We are looking back at Camaraceras and Arthropleura as these strange, bizarre, failed experiments of history. But in the grand context of deep time, are we just the next layer of sediment?
If you look at that 12-hour clock, it seems pretty likely, doesn't it?
Well, that's a terrifying thought.
Yeah.
But also kind of awe-inspiring in a way.
And remember, the dinosaurs didn't fully disappear. The source makes a great point to tell us to look at modern birds.
Right. Every time you see a pigeon on the street or a sparrow in your backyard.
You are looking at the direct surviving lineage of the theropod dinosaurs. You are looking at a dinosaur. They just got smaller, grew feathers for flight, and survived the asteroid.
So the monsters are still among us. They just got a lot smaller and learned how to fly. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the monsters of the Paleozoic and the dawn of the dinosaurs. It's been a wild ride through time.
A pleasure, as always, to explore the fossil record.
Keep asking questions, keep digging, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Stay curious.